Hello and welcome to the Capital Conversation with me, Michael Hayman. Now, can you feel the fire? Because my guest today is former Dragon's Den investor Piers Linney. He launched his first business age 13 and he's achieved entrepreneurial excellence ever since. His is a story that takes us from newsagents to new technologies, and it's an inspirational one. Piers, welcome to the show. Great to have you on the show. We could talk about new technologies, but let's start with the newsagents. Tell us about that young Piers Linney, because it's a great story.
So I grew up in Lancashire in a mill town, and it was much colder in those days, and I had a paper round where I earned £4 a week, £4.50. If I was late, it was £4, and I sort of thought, this is not for me. And my dad said to me, look, on Sunday, because they didn't deliver on Sundays, can you go on your bike, get me a paper and bring it back so I don't have to get out of bed, and I'll pay you. And I thought, okay, fair enough. So I did it. The neighbour then said, oh, that's a nice service, could you do the same for me? And to cut a long story short, I then sort of flyered all my neighbours, built out a paper round. I went to the wholesaler and said, look, could you deliver me a bundle of papers?
Proper Sunday service.
Yeah, and you see them films throwing outside the truck at my house rather than newsagent. He said, yeah, if you're going to pay me, fine. So I did that, and I sort of made about £15 on a Sunday morning for about 4 hours work rather than doing, getting up for 5 days during the week. And then about 2 years later, when it became less cool to have a paper round, I sold it for about £100. So it was my first exit as well.
Now you're 14 at that age.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and I kind of learned then that by finding a niche and monetising it and working hard, you could create some value and create wealth. In those days, it was to buy a BMX.
Did you recognise yourself as an entrepreneur then? Or were you just actually making the money for the BMX?
I think the means was for that end at that time, but after that I never stopped then. I was selling things at the university, when I was at college. I did door-to-door sales of various products. I was a guy selling spoons and pots and pans, and I never stopped.
Do you think that, a lot of people will ask this question about, are entrepreneurs born or are they made by the circumstances of their lives? Where do you stand on that?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think you need to have a certain appetite for risk, but I think people talking about that, they think a lot about startups. You look at most entrepreneurs historically were backed by venture capital fund in management buyouts. So they were people that became very good at what they do, probably never thought they were going to start a business, and ended up funded by the likes of the 3 I's of the world back in the day to run a business. So it can be trained into, and leadership, which is what the army does. Leadership can be born, you can be a born leader, but often leadership can be trained into somebody as well.
But another aspect for you is family, your background, the people that brought you up, your mum, your dad. Tell us a little bit about them and about how they shaped your outlook on life.
They shaped my life, and they're still shaping it. So my mum was a West Indian from Barbados, came over to be a nurse, spent a whole career in the NHS, and she was very entrepreneurial, very enterprising. She was the one running the slimming club, whatever it was, at the health centre. And when she retired, she went into business. She started a business doing selling candles and doing flower arranging for weddings. My dad was a working class Mancunian lad who managed to get a scholarship and go to Cambridge. But in those days, he just came straight back. I had those role models, and they were really, really important, and they still are to this day.
And in terms of that lesson then, that was about getting on, moving forward, because there always seems, with your story, it always sounds like one of great drive, great sort of progress. You had a lot of different careers that you've looked at, from investment banking through to being a lawyer, through to being an entrepreneur. But it's also been about overcoming challenges, like failing exams. Let's take you back to your 11 plus. How did that shape you?
So if your mum's West Indian, you don't want to fail your 11 plus. Well, the riskiest thing I've ever done. So my career, people look at it and they say, look, your career was well mapped out, it makes sense. And from a certain perspective today, that's what it looks like. But you've got to remember that when I was at school doing O-levels, I didn't know what business was. Everyone thought I'd be an accountant. So I then decided I wanted to be a lawyer. Didn't know what being a lawyer really meant. I did a law A-level. And when I got to university, I had no idea what law really meant, or accountancy or investment banking. Until I got into the city, I didn't understand investment banking or hedge funds. Until I got to investment banking, I didn't know what a hedge fund was. So along the way, I've been sort of I faced hedges, climbed up, looked over it, seen another one and climbed over that one and gone along. When you reverse engineer it, my origin story, as people say, it looks like it was easy.
But there must have had a lot of self-belief in that story.
So people say to me, did the fact you went to a comprehensive school and your ethnicity, did that hold you back? Now, I think at a macro level, it did to some extent, because that's just the way the world's made. But at a micro level, me personally, it didn't, because I was just quite bloody minded. When I decided to do something, I did it. It wasn't until I was at Credit Suisse, or when an entrepreneur made some money, and a TV producer said to me, actually the government did, they made me a role model. You should be a role model. I kind of asked the question back, why? And when it was explained to me, look around you, the amount of people like you from your background here, then I began to realise how important that was.
But when you look at your career, some of those things you've just spoken about, it looks like you've jumped from one mountain top to another, but you've had to break into industries, you've had to often face sort of no, in terms of the first answers, but you've persevered with it. Give us a sense of those barriers in terms of what it meant to break into the City of London, to become an investment banker. What are the things that you had to overcome personally?
So using your metaphor, so people see you on the mountaintops. They don't see you battling through the troughs, the valleys in between. So to me, to get into law, I applied to 68 different law firms, some admittedly twice, and only one firm, SJ Berwin, it's not around anymore, gave me a chance. It was a venture capital firm. And when I got there, I realised that I was fascinated by the entrepreneurs and the funds invested in them, not so much dotting I's and crossing T's. And I thought I want to be an investment banker. So then I applied to all the investment banks, didn't get a look in, and I applied to be an analyst at the time, didn't get a look in at all. And one bank, BZW at the time, Barclays Capital, they sort of gave me a chance to say, look, join us. And I kind of joined there, and almost immediately, Barclays put it up for sale, and I thought, I'm in,
Timing.
but I'm going to get kicked straight out. Credit Suisse acquired it, and I ended up at Credit Suisse for about 3 years. So it was extremely hard for me to get into the city. And I worked really hard at applications, and I had meetings where I said, look, literally, just give me a chance. If I'm rubbish, fire me. And people did.
I mean, a lot of people complain about the city that's going to many jobs in institutional finance. You've got to have had a very, predictable, I guess, career route, educational route, social route. I mean, a lot of what you bring to the table is the path less trodden. You've not gone through a lot of those same routes. But in terms of, is that part of your edge? Is that part of your strength, do you think, in terms of what's made you successful there?
I think that journey's made me who I am. I think you see more people like me now in those places. But even today, I've been involved in the city, and I go to events. And I'll give you an example. I go to events where I walk in and people ask me to go and get them a drink. I go to meetings where people...
How does that feel? I mean, a successful person at your level...
What do you do? What do you do? Do you sort of say, don't you know who I am? You don't do it, let it go. I think on those instances, there's not much you can do. But what you try and do is change the game. So I go to meetings where I won an award, so a regional finalist, a very large entrepreneurs award. When I got there, I went into the cloakroom, gave them my bag and my coat. As I walked out, 2 other finalists gave me their bag and coat to hang up. And I kind of laugh it off, but I think, right.
But it is one of those things, is that here we are living in one of the most diverse cities in the world. But the question is, how inclusive is it really?
So the city generally, and UK boardrooms, UK PLC, it is diverse here. It's less diverse as you approach the top. And that's what needs to change. And that's not about incrementalism. That needs radical change.
And of course, that commitment, not only to the radical change, but to the generational change, when you're very involved in backing young people. Tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to achieve with that kind of work.
So I've been involved with various charities and things I do personally. I even go back to my old school and talk to the kids there. And that's really about you're absolutely right, it's a generational thing, this, and it needs a pincer movement. You've got to try and change the way people are recruited. There's going to be a huge talent shortage across Europe. So you need to widen the talent pool and deepen your talent pool by embracing diversity in all sorts. And then there's the schools, which is making sure that kids have role models, so they aspire to do these things. They see people like them doing these things.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking here about, you set up Work Insight, you're working on Virgin Unite, lots of areas where you're looking and directly working with young people. What's your sense of how they feel about business, how they feel about careers, how they feel about the world of work?
I think business, you hear this, I've said quite a lot now, that business, entrepreneurs are the new rock stars. And that's dangerous because business is not something to take on lightly. It's a life change. It's a life-changing decision, and it's about making sure people understand what it means to go into business. The problem is, as you're probably familiar with, you go onto the internet or YouTube, and there's lots of people telling you can be a billionaire overnight, just buy this package, and that's not how it goes. There's a lot more to it than that. So it's making sure children, especially even younger people, are equipped and they're enterprising, because the labour market of tomorrow, half the jobs in 10 years, 15 years time don't exist today.
Time for a short break, and when we come back we're going to be talking about how to get the perfect pitch. Stay tuned. Welcome back. My guest today is the entrepreneur Piers Linney. Now, Piers, we spoke a lot about your early stage. Bring us up to date, the entrepreneurial journey. I think just, maybe one of the highs, one of the lows.
One of the recent highs is we've been starting a company in the mountain bike sector, so I've been looking at wellness actually, so part of exercise and fitness, so that's something that fits in there really well, but it's very sort of tech focused. It's my first foray into really manufacturing technology. Recent downs have been, I was a business in the cloud sector.
That was outsourced.
Yeah, that didn't work out the way we wanted it to. We were working with a very large partner who didn't deliver, but at the end of the day, you're running the company, so I actually lost money on that, as did other people. So they're the downs,
right.
But I think you have to get back up and learn from it and move on to the next.
So when you face success and I guess failure, what do you learn about yourself in those moments, do you think?
I think sometimes you kind of think those even when I had the mantra that you got to get on with it, you still think in those moments, those dark moments of well, how did that happen? What went wrong? And it's all my fault. And you're blaming yourself or others. You got to take it on the chin, really. That at the end of the day, that is what entrepreneurs do.
I mean, it's funny. I mean, some of the entrepreneurs I meet, it's interesting, is that some of them actually find success quite hard to deal with, because it's almost like don't say it because my luck might change, or I don't feel successful yet, even if it looks that way. Other entrepreneurs find the actual point of failure is a real learning for them about themselves, because they don't really accept it as failure. I mean, what brings out the best in you, do you think?
Well, I think entrepreneurs, you fail every day to some extent, and you have success every day. The deal is to have more successes than the failures every day. The thing about me is that my successes and my life really was sort of a bright light was shone upon them by the media and being on TV, and that can be quite hard to deal with. And I was called a reluctant celebrity in many ways. So that struggle, I think, what drives me really, and what I need to be is busy. I'm not a good person without a busy diary. Well,
busy diary, I'm sure you've got that, but let's talk about that reluctant celebrity. You did The Secret Millionaire, but I guess where most people came across you was 2 years in the den as a dragon. Tell us about that experience. I mean, the first question I've got for you is did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it. So people say to me, why did you do it? And my answer is, because they asked me. And I did enjoy the process. It is real. It's manufactured. You turn up. I got to meet the fellow dragons, and next thing you know, there's an entrepreneur standing in front of you pitching. So that's real, and I made some good investments. I invested in a company that was #1 on the tech track last year, so I've done quite well out of Dragon's Den, hopefully. But I enjoyed the experience.
Who was your favourite dragon? Who was your favourite to work with?
Well, I know I'm still very good friends with Kelly Hoppen. So right. We had the same experience. We were there for the same time.
Glad you didn't give the Bruce Forsyth answer. They're all my favourites, but I mean,
well, they're very busy and you work together and people go and do their own things. But you're still in touch with one or two of them. But experience was great, and I learned a lot from that. The celebrity side of it wasn't really me.
So when you say that, I mean, what was that? The sort of the exposure, the kind of intensity of it.
I think it's when you're a celebrity, like say you're on sort of a reality TV, for example, your fame is enhanced by turning up to things and going to events and the opening of a fridge, whatever it might be. When you're in business, it doesn't really work like that. And people kind of expect you to be. So what I've kind of done is, I've sort of some soul searching over the last 12 months really, and thought, what do I do with the profile? And what I've been doing is putting out sort of practical, no-nonsense content to help entrepreneurs sort of start up and scale up.
Are you a shy person?
No, anyone who knows me, wouldn't say that about me. It's the fact that.
But I mean, a lot of the things that you're reacting to almost go with the job of being on kind of like a big primetime show like that.
But they create a caricature of you. you know, and that it's not really people who meet me, they think that I'm the person.
You're so much nicer than you are on TV.
Yeah, I'm funny, I'm better looking. They think you're the person they saw on TV, and that's down to editing. I'm a bit different. I'm probably a slightly softer character.
I mean, a lot of people will, when they take aim at Dragon's Den, I mean, it's done a long time in terms of TV years. I mean, it's really sort of stayed the distance. But a lot of people, when they sort of complain about it, will say it doesn't really reflect real business. It doesn't, the whole process is contrived. It's not a real experience. I mean, what's your sense of it as a process?
I disagree. So the Dragon's Den experience for those entrepreneurs is real. We see one side of the coin. There's a whole other side of the coin behind the scenes where they spend a couple of weeks coming up to that moment. The point is that business is very hard to do on TV. That's why you don't see much of it. But the experience of pitching to potential investors, I think, has inspired lots of people to do the same, try and start a business. But Dragon's Den, you might not invest for something they show you on TV. It's made to look televisual. You might not invest because it's some technical legal issue, actually. But what they'll show is because they were crying or I didn't like the logo. So they're telling a story, but it's as close as you can get to putting business on TV that people are actually going to watch.
Okay, so there might be some people watching this show tonight who are thinking, I might want to do this. I might want to actually go through a process. If you think about the do's and don'ts of pitching, I guess, for the Den, but also more generally, what's your top do, what's your top don't?
So I think if you're pitching, what comes across is in Dragon's Den, and any entrepreneur, especially a young business, pitching to potential investors or potential employees or even clients or suppliers, is you've got to believe in it, and actually that shines through. And what they're really looking at the end of the day is you. It's the person standing in front of them. Yes, you've got a business, you've got a product, but at that stage, people are investing in and buying into you, the individual. So make sure you're selling your business and the opportunity, but you're selling yourself, because people
so it's
want to know,
a very personal
can
matter.
this person see it through?
Right. And then when you're thinking about where it goes really wrong, I mean, I won't ask you, unless you want to tell me the worst pitch you've ever received. Give us a sense of the nightmare.
So there's the obvious ones where they explain for 5 minutes what they're doing, and at the end of the pitch you still do not understand what the business does. They're the ones where the chap had a business where he wanted £2 million to get a floor in the Shard for his marketing department for a product which essentially was a tap that filled a bath and put some rose oil in there. So there's things like that which are, is that a business, or does he just want to spend the cash and go on holiday? So there's a real spectrum on Dragon's Den.
Where do you feel most comfortable, funder or founder?
A bit of both. I decided to be more of an investor for a period of time, but I'm finding now, and things I'm looking at and people I'm talking to, is that I want to get involved in something. I want to disrupt a market. So I'm looking at a few things.
I mean, you talk about disruption. I mean, another one of your roles is on the innovation charity Nesta. I mean, when you look at the kind of disruptive climate for the UK, I mean, is it a good place to be growing that kind of business now? Do you see these big facts like Brexit as changing anything?
Well, so Nesta, we do a lot of research, and some of the research it shows is that if you look at the future, be it AI, machine learning, robotics, is that what's really important, the winners and losers are going to be defined by creativity. So a lot of the grunt work, be it building walls, even accountants are at risk, or even coding actually, can be done by software. So it's the creativity that's going to shine through.
So when you say grunt work, I mean anything that's capable of repetition?
Repetition, warehouse workers, admin, anything like that can be automated, those jobs are at risk. Now, there are going to be new jobs that come about, but...
Will there be enough, do you think?
Well, you read some research to say there's a little bit more, but the way I look at it is the differences between innovation up to now, it's been linear. I think innovation now is becoming exponential. So I don't see how, if you look at the education system, the way people are trained for the future, I just don't see it being able to catch up. So my personal view is no.
Right, and when you look at that kind of brave new world, I mean, how match fit is Britain for it, do you think?
So Britain, if and when Brexit happens, I think this country was built by entrepreneurs and it's going to be relying on them in the future. So it's incredibly important that the powers that be recognise that and make sure they are supportive. I think otherwise we're in for a rough ride.
Right, and to that point about backing entrepreneurs, I mean, you're doing a lot with Startup Scale Up. This is your online sort of tutorial video package, actually sort of inspiring entrepreneurs with the knowledge. Tell us a little bit about what you're hoping to achieve with that.
So I get asked for advice in men's toilets, on trains, on the
hanging out
underneath this table, and I thought that, and I can't, and I get engaged. I can't do one-to-one. So I thought, let's just try and put some content out there. Let's scale up me essentially, and let's try and leverage the Dragon's Den profile, because I've never really done it. I kind of shied away from it. So I started doing content for startups and scale-ups. And the idea is that this is not motivational content. I'm not out there saying, if you go vegan, run a marathon and meditate, you'll be a billionaire. This is not about it. This is about how do you get through payroll, and should you register
so this
HMRC?
is
Practical, no-nonsense advice to help entrepreneurs, especially startup entrepreneurs, to execute like they've done it before.
And how did the market respond to that, do you think?
Well, the feedback, I have to say, has been it's been mind-blowing. So it's inspired me to do more. And what I'm actually doing now, it's been a labour of love, is putting a course together for startups with that practical, no-nonsense advice sort of in one place.
Right. I mean, just moving on. I mean, you know, you've been a number of awards you've won. Financial Times awarded you as one of its top 100 ethnic minority leaders in technology. When you look at the role of the role model, I mean, this is, I guess, is our kind of final little section to look at. When you look at your sort of position in terms of being that role model, tell us a little bit about that.
So I was first asked to be a role model by the government in 2008, and since then that's what I've tried to be, because I'm a firm believer in, again, that pincer movement. You've got to start with education, but actually people need role models. They need to see people like them doing things they aspire to do, and that will inspire them to at least try.
And you can get there, I guess. The fact that you can make it. I mean, is that what you're showing with this work? Is the possibilities, the fact that more people can achieve the sort of things that you're doing?
Well, I remember once I was in an office, a Credit Suisse office in Tower 42, closing a deal at night, looking over the sort of city, and I called a friend of mine. He said, "Where are you?" And I told him. He said, "It's amazing. Do you realise you came from you're a mixed race lad from a Milltown comprehensive, and you're now an M&A and banker in the City of London? Do you realise what you're doing here?" And I didn't realise. And I remember that moment to this day, looking out over the City of London, thinking, "Yeah, he's right. I've actually managed to get here."
What a shame we could have gone on for so long, Piers. I'm absolutely sure. Thank you so much for coming onto the Capital Conversation. And that's all we have time for another week. And thanks to my guest, Piers Linney, a serial entrepreneur who takes success seriously. And while you may feel like he's got a lot done, in the words of the showman, you ain't seen nothing yet. And for more tales from the top, join me next time on the Capital Conversation. I'll see you then.